This is Joe Walsh. One thing I do when I'm not playing rock and roll is get on the air as an amateur radio operator. Also called ham radio, is a communication service provided by ordinary people just like you and me. We have a national emergency communication system in place 24/7, 365. Find out more about amateur radio at arrl.org/whatishamradio. See you on the air.
This is the Outdated Entertainment Hour podcast. My name is Bob Fopp. In this edition, we're going to take a look back at the classic movie musicals of all time, featuring one of our favorite guests, Adam Baritot. Actor, director, you name it, he's done it. Most unlike that guy in row 8 over there. Gobstoppers? In a theater? Philistine.
Hi there.
It's the Outdated Entertainment Hour. Stop smacking your gum. People are trying to hear. The nice thing about starting a second podcast is when the second podcast does well. And in the last 6 months, even though we have gone to a monthly schedule for the most part, the numbers are up. I guess people are discovering the Outdated Entertainment Hour late, and I appreciate each and every one of you who does listen. And I think one of the reasons you do listen is I have great guests. And here for what I believe is at least his third appearance, maybe his fourth. It is fourth. Adam Baritot, welcome back, my friend.
Thank you, Bob. I'm always happy to be here.
Well, I'm happy to have you for sure. Adam and I go back as friends long before we started doing this podcast for Alderall. And he is an actor, producer. Give people a brief resume of what you've been up to.
Oh, gracious. I have worked in theater, in and around theater for more than 20 years, coming up on 25. I do other sundry things, but ultimately performing always draws me back. I do a lot of voiceovers, as is evidenced right now. I did a lot of musical theater. It was my love and my passion. It is what my degrees are in, and I love to talk about it whenever I get the chance, and we're going to do some of that today, I think.
Absolutely. And please explain our topic.
Today's topic. Second time I was on, we were doing 10 most influential musicals, which was a fascinating deep dive. And of course, it's always neat to talk about musicals. So Bob reached out and he's like, hey, let's talk more. I'm like, okay, how about we tackle movie musicals? How about we really go exploring? But I gave myself some parameters this time. So Bob doesn't even know about this. The parameters I had for looking at movie musicals were as follows. I wanted to focus on musicals that were originally for film, not something that transferred from Broadway, something that was original for film. There'll be a moment or two when I break that rule just because some shows wrote new songs for their movies. So we'll talk about that. I'm also going to generally avoid animated films. The discussion of Disney musicals could be a whole hour, 2 hours, 4 hours unto its own. So we're going to focus largely on some live action musicals. That does not mean I'm going to do the live action version of Beauty and the Beast or the live action version of The Little Mermaid. Nope. It was an animated film first.
Right.
So I've set out my parameters. I'm reasonably ready to roll, but we're gonna see what happens. There might be some debating, some anger, and for the record, this is not an exhaustive list. If I miss anything, I am so sorry. Feel free in your comments to let me have it.
Here's the thing, like no list is ever, it's not a definitive list. It's just to look back through history, number one. Number two, I have a question for you.
Surely.
In your mind's eye, is it very difficult to transfer a Broadway musical into a film? I always look back at the debacle that was the producer's film with Matthew Broderick and Nathan Lane, because it was such an unbelievably wonderful theater experience that translated to the flattest film you'd ever want to watch. How often does that happen?
I think of that film specifically as the Google Translate curse. And I'm explaining myself. So when The Producers was created, it was created as a film. It's the film The Producers. It stars Zero and Gene Wilder, and it is flippin' iconic. They transferred that to a musical. Now, that first translation, pretty good. Not the same thing, but pretty good. You saw the translation of that back in the other direction. But now you're taking it back to make it a movie again. And there's something that happens about the third or fourth or fifth iteration of making a photocopy that it starts to become illegible. And this is kind of what happened. It became a mess because you went back in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
I take nothing away from Mel Brooks and nothing away from the creative oeuvre, but it does not carry as well as the Broadway show did. I agree with you. I just do.
It just, well, some were complaining about I think the director was the same director they had on Broadway and did not change the cadence of the actors. In other words, you have to project wildly on the Broadway stage and it looks normal. But if you do it on film, it looks manic.
Yes, it does.
And I think that was a big problem. Everybody was acting as if they were on stage still.
The levels were not correct. When you see Zero and Gene doing it, they know how to bring it down on occasion. There are moments. There is some manic to it, but somehow it's contained. This seems like people were reaching. Okay, I'm on my soapbox now. We have lost some of the subtlety of how to get the laugh. Sometimes when you're watching comedy, and we can talk about this in the future, everybody's reaching for the laugh. There's this wonderful theater story from years and years ago. It's attributed to Judi Dench or someone of the ilk. Let's call it Judi Dench now. It was probably somebody else. Where this young actress is in a play and she's got this line where she's asking for a cup of tea and she knows the line is funny. She's certain the line is funny, but it keeps falling flat. It keeps falling flat. And finally she goes up to this great theater maven. I don't know why this line isn't funny. What am I doing wrong? And the old acting maven says, "Darling, just ask for a cup of tea." And the second she did that, the second she pulled all the air out of it and just asked for the tea, got a laugh. Part of the problem is we're reaching for the laugh. Everybody thinks they're zany and wild rather than going, the room is blowing up, sir. Sometimes taking the air out of something is wonderful. And I feel like that film didn't quite get that. Everybody was just zany and cockamamie. And levels make it funny. That's why Harvey Korman was so funny. Because somebody had to be the foil. Somebody had to be the dry reed. That's why he and Conway worked so well together. Right. So yeah, that's my feeling on it. And I get way off topic.
Great point. Even on the stage that works. I saw of all people Charles Kimbrough, who used to be on the Murphy Brown show.
Yep.
In a Noel Coward revival, very understated and drew belly laughs for 90 minutes. Yep. One of the great comic performances I've ever seen anywhere, film or theater. He's a very underrated actor.
He was, I think. Is he was? I'm not certain. The trope for this is a deadpan snarker. A deadpan actor is comic gold. If you can find somebody who does it right, you can build a whole show around a deadpan performance. Love it. To this day, I love it so much.
Well, I'll stop diverting you from your goal here. Let's get on to the movie musicals, man. And I'm anxious to see which one. And by the way, I'll just say this one last thing. Producers and Goodfellas to me are A and 1A, my favorite films of all time.
Brilliant. And Goodfellas is close to a perfect film. I agree with you.
It's art.
I have some that I would add to that list. We'll talk about that later.
Sure.
But yeah, if we're talking about movie musicals, we have to start with the first film, the first talkie ever made. And I'm going to mention it and then we're going to leave it because it's a racist mess. And that's Al Jolson, the jazz singer. He's singing on the film, and it is a movie musical, but it is of that review standard where you've got people singing about things that aren't necessarily what's happening on the stage, but they kind of are, but they're not, but they kind of are. We started with movie musicals the second we had talkies, and they were reviews. Most famous at the time were big old Dancing Girls, Busby Berkeley, things like that, and things like Broadway Melody. they probably made a dozen Broadway melody films where it was just a bunch of different Broadway shows with some dancing girls and just put it up on the screen. And these populated the black and white era of the late 20s and even into the early 30s. I think you even had a Broadway melodies in the 1940s. They would put out a new one every once in a while because people would pay to see singing and dancing girls on film in black and white. Talkies were the technology of the time. And that's the foundation. That's where they were starting. By the time you get to the 30s, we start to have the big stars. The 30s is Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers. You have films like Top Hat or Roberta. Babes in Arms comes out at this time. Or even films about Broadway, like 42nd Street. 42nd Street comes out in the 1930s. It's this time of this high peak of, let's do more stylized musicals. And that drive for stylized musicals and music to carry the plot ultimately brings us to 1939 when we get The Wizard of Oz. And as we talked about The Wizard of Oz before, because it informed Broadway. Wizard of Oz is giving you, okay, here are songs that propel the plot line, so we can create this cohesive thing called a musical where the dancing and the songs drive forward the plot. And The Wizard of Oz predates Oklahoma. So we've got that great influence there. But the number of stars that were coming out in the 1930s, not just Astaire and Rogers, but it's Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy and all of that fun stuff, Rosemarie or, Indian Love Call and all those tunes from the 1930s, they were pop culture. Pop culture was musical theater. And you're going to see that for the next 20 to 30 years in history, that was the big uptick. There were probably 30 musicals, at least 30 musicals put out every year from the 30s through to this early 60s, because this was the golden age of American musical theater, and film was going to reflect it. Sure.
Do you think that the preponderance of musicals in that early era that you just spoke of was kind of basically like giving vaudeville or Broadway to people who had no access to it in those days? In other words, a lot of people around America didn't have a vaudeville or a Broadway, but now you could see the same type of thing. Do you think that had any rationale behind why they made so many musicals?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It was access for people who didn't have access. And the folks who were making those films were smart to pick up the nickels from all of the small local theaters that might not have a vaudeville show in. Even vaudeville houses started showing screeners when they didn't have a vaudeville troupe in. Ultimately, this would be the death knell of vaudeville. We know that. But for right now, you had both living at the same time. You could see a live show, you could see a film, and people appreciated that they were two different things and they were both still pretty darn good. So yeah, that's up and through to 39. And 39 is The Wizard of Oz, and we see the big turnover. We see Broadway become better because of movie musicals. And that's one of the great things about that time period is you saw one feeding the other. But there's going to be a dark period for about 4 or 5 years because there's a war going on. You've got World War II about to start. And so the entertainment starts to drive in that direction. It's either the 1940s are largely about, at least the early 40s are about escapism, or they're reflective of our military boys overseas. And we're going to see that with the voices. We're going to see that with some of the construction. And the 1940s, we start to see more celebrities. We start to see the uptick, the beginning of Gene Kelly. We see the uptick of Frank Sinatra. You start seeing road pictures with Bing Crosby and Bob Hope, all of that wonderful thing. The films, because Mickey Rooney and Judy Garland are married at this point, they'll just throw them on screen at once a year and put out that film and it'll be a hit. There's a lot of that. Films like Easter Parade or On the Town, which is still just it's a glorious thing for me to watch On the Town. And I've seen it live on stage, but it was a movie first. So this is a little bit of that backwards. Hey, this was a movie musical. You had Tin Pan Alley basically writing new musicals, dozens of new musicals a year for this reason. If it didn't go to Broadway, they were going to make a film about it. Any Broadway composer like Sammy Cahn or Yip Harburg had just a trunk full of songs where they'd pull a few out and they're like, let's mash this together. Poof, you got a musical. It was a prolific time. And when folks came back from World War II, And we had the boom that occurred afterward, the financial boom that occurred afterward, the most prosperous 30 years of the American culture, the way we think of it. Yeah, people had expendable income and they were going to watch things that made them feel good. And the movie musical was part of that. Now, in the 1950s, we see the big uptick. The 50s into the 60s. We're smack dab in the middle of the golden era of Broadway. Any Broadway show that's halfway decent, they're going to make a film adaptation of it. This is just anything. There's going to be a film of Oklahoma. There's going to be a film of State Fair. They're going to make a movie out of everything. They'll make a movie out of Guys and Dolls. Now, some of this goes into the 60s, but the 50s and 60s are the high water mark for musicals on film. Dozens and dozens of films each year. There was something for everybody. But the 50s, just from 51 to 53, you had White Christmas, Singin' in the Rain, and American in Paris in a 2.5, 3-year period. Just boom, have some films. But there were so many. There was Gigi coming out at the same time for, not exactly the topic that we would necessarily talk about today. But yeah, Gigi, Gentlemen Prefer Blondes. You had these tremendous films in the 1950s. And the film quality at the time, when you think classic film musical, you imagine that film quality. It kind of sticks in your head.
Mm-hmm.
Like even VistaVision, I think that was White Christmas was done in VistaVision. This was the canvas for Irving Berlin. This was the canvas for so many of those composers. They didn't even write for Broadway so much anymore. They were writing specifically for films because the residuals were better.
I saw An American in Paris relatively late in my life. I think I was in my 40s when I saw it for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
What a work of art. My gosh.
It's one of the most beautiful films.
It really is.
is.
But the fact that it goes from a spoken word story for the first 3/4 of the film and then into the dance sequence, it's like some part of me is shocked that audiences accepted that, but I'm glad they did because I've never seen anything quite like it.
It is magical. And yes, that is another musical that they moved to the stage. Film first, stage second. There was a lot of that. There was this back and forth that happened. But always when you got to that second or third back and forth, when it was a film, then a movie, then a film, we start to see a little bit of degrading of the image. We'll talk more about that as we go. But yes, 1950s, incredible boom time. And that does carry into the 1960s. Into the 1960s, I've got this huge list of films. I list the producers here because there was score written for that. I mean, there was Springtime for Hitler and Love Power. Both came from that film. So yeah. And yes, I say Love Power so you can have your LSD.
I just laugh just thinking of it. I'm sorry. Like I say, it's my favorite movie of all time. And it's like, there are 2 bad jokes in the film. The rest of it is sublime.
Absolutely. But again, huge swaths of Broadway shows being brought to film because they were a success on the stage and maybe they put the thing out on the road. And then people are like, well, folks in Keokuk aren't going to be able to see My Fair Lady. Let's make a film of My Fair Lady. And they did cultivate more musical theater fans because of it. Folks who would travel from Keokuk to Des Moines in order to see the big show when it came into town. It became something significant. It became the cross-pollination of our culture. But the 60s also brings something more. In the 60s, we start to see the boomer children grow up. They start to get into their teens. They become a bit hormonal. The musical shifts a little bit, and our original musicals shift a bit. They're still going to put out the stuff that's on Broadway, but now we get Elvis.
Right.
Now we get the Elvis films, all Blue Hawaii and all of the stuff like that. There's going to be some of that. They're going to be the beach bingo films, Beach Blanket Bingo. You're going to have Frankie Avalon and Annette Funicello. You're going to have all of those classic films. Well, that's what musicals of the time were. You throw a bunch of songs together, get some, folks in their early 20s together, throw them on the screen, scantily clad, poof, you got a musical. That's what it was. Have a few tunes, have some scantily clad early 20-somethings, poof, musical. That very much carried for the boomer generation. That's why those beach films did so well. That's why the Elvis films did so well. And you had stuff from overseas going on as well. You had like Umbrellas of Cherbourg, or what's the other one? Young Girls of Roquefort. You had some stuff, oh, we're going to set it in France. That makes it exotic. Poof, movie musical. And there was a lot of that. You still had Tin Pan Alley. You were still generating all of these musicals. But we're going to start coming to the end of that shortly. Around the end of the 1960s, the influence of rock and roll really starts to be felt. Yeah, surf music, yeah, Elvis, but the Beatles climbing into the effect as well. One of the bigger flag in the sand moments for the 60s would have been Yellow Submarine, and that's coming out in 68. And it's the Beatles creating a concept album, this idea that and a rock album could also tell a similar story to a musical. And on the heels of that, you're going to get other bands doing their concept albums. You're going to get Pink Floyd doing The Wall. You're going to get things of that nature, which will eventually become films themselves. So we start to see that evolution. By the mid-60s, Hair has already been out, so the idea of a rock musical is not so far-fetched. They'll make a movie out of Hair, but it was a stage musical first. So you get that wonderful little dichotomy going back and forth there. Personal favorite from the 1960s was made for TV in the early to mid-60s, and that was Evening Primrose. That was one of the first musicals where Sondheim was writing the music and lyrics. And it's this neat little 60-minute sci-fi horror musical that was on one of those like Hallmark Television or something like that, or the Texaco Hour, one of those television shows where it's like a little bit of entertainment. Here you go. That was the world's introduction to Stephen Sondheim as the cohesive writer and composer. And it was never on stage, not until much later. It was a television musical first.
Right. Do you recall a big budget Hollywood musical sometime in the 60s? I know because my parents dragged me to the drive-in to watch it during the 1960s. The Unsinkable Molly Brown.
Oh, yes. The Unsinkable Molly Brown. Uh-huh. It has been done on stage. And I had trouble finding when I did my first research, or maybe I just dropped the detail, whether it was on stage first or whether it was filmed first. But there was this giving over. If you did a show on Broadway, what would you do with a film budget? And so they made it big and glorious. So they would shell out the money, and it would be any musical. Honestly, if the musical did fairly well, they'd plunk it on a film. I think of The Pajama Game. It was a musical in the 50s. The movie was in 64. And, John Raitt was, always John Raitt. I'll pay to see John Raitt. They went all out. They set it in a real factory. They had outdoor scenes. All that stuff you cannot do on Broadway, they did. Even got Carol Haney back. They spared no expense because when it was a movie musical and it was the 50s or 60s, it was coining money. Didn't matter how mediocre the musical was, people would go and see it. There were people who just spent their afternoons. They'd, at this point, I think it was a dime, but, you'd get your dimes together, you'd go and you watch movies, and everybody was happy. It was an escapist paradise. The movie musical led the way.
You bet it did. I saw my share, I'll tell you that. My local theater admission for children was 50 cents, and in the drive-in, you got in for free. So, it was like we saw a lot of movies when we were kids. Really did. A lot of musicals, too. That's where the Unsinkable. I remember my parents making a big deal with it. Debbie Reynolds.
Yep. Or for those of you young folks in the audience, that's Carrie Fisher's mother.
Right. So are we moving into the 70s? Or
We're going to move into the 70s. Like I said, I could spend 3 hours talking about just movie musicals from the 1960s back. I could spend it just on 40s to the 60s because there were just so gosh darn many of them. Mm-hmm. And they'd throw anybody on the screen. You had Marlon Brando playing Sky Masterson in Guys and Dolls. Someone thought that was a good idea. This was a commonplace thing. Throw some celebrities on the screen and off you go. Make them sing. Maybe they sing, maybe they don't. People are just going to pay money to watch and find out. But the 70s is the ebb. We see the end of the golden age of Broadway, which is about 65, so there are fewer films. If you go to Wikipedia, there are these big, two columns long lists of musicals all through the 40s and 50s and 60s. Once you hit the 70s, it's one column, and maybe it's a dozen musicals per year. As we've discussed before, the 70s were a little bit of a dark age for Broadway. Broadway got grittier, Broadway got darker. That meant that folks weren't going to make those into movies because they weren't feel good. It became, no, that's Broadway being all cutting edge. Those films would eventually be made into movies, but not until like the 80s or 90s, or in the case of something like Chicago, the 2000s. It takes decades for those 70s musicals to become nostalgic and for us to put those on film as well. But the 70s are a different feel. The 70s, you do get a little bit darker. The 70s are not afraid of putting death and sadness on film. When I think of a 70s movie musical, my mind always goes to Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory first because of my age. Because Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory was a bomb and it didn't really connect with people until it was a video,
Right.
a home video. And I was a child in the 1980s and we wore that videotape out. We had to buy a second one. It was like that. It was that influential for us. But is it a happy musical? It has a happy ending. Is it really a happy musical? No, it's terrifying. You're hurting children. Children are blowing up. People are singing, la, 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 you suffer. It was a dark and grainy and letting Gene Wilder off his leash to be just as psychotic as he could choose to be. It was a stark and magnificent film. It was meant to be a commercial. The film was produced by Nestle to make it into a commercial to sell their Wonka bar. Turns out the Wonka bar wasn't well made and they ended up scrapping the whole project for decades. And the movie faded into obscurity until videotapes 15 years later. But yeah, when I think of movie musicals of the 1970s, I think darker, I think grittier. I think the Scrooge movie musical that was made. I don't know if I'm sure you must have seen that one. The stuff that was kids' movies, even 70s into the 80s, were dark, were kind of macabre. Things like Charlotte's Web was technically a musical. That was an animated musical, but we're skipping through that. The Muppet movie had some darkness to it, and that's what was a musical at the time. We started to steer our musicals toward children, but we kept the darkness. The 70s, a fascinating time. Go ahead.
There is something about the final scene of the Muppet movie that tears me apart emotionally.
Mm-hmm.
It's where every single Muppet is singing, the Rainbow Connection at the end, but they changed the last line, and you. That's Jim Henson talking to his audience. Gets me every time.
Jim's going to appear on this list a couple more times once we get to the next decade. But yes, the Muppet movie is, oh goodness. Oh, his name just jumped out of my head. The composer for the Muppet movie.
Paul Williams.
Paul Williams, thank you. Thank you. He appears as the pianist in the El Slizo Cafe. Got his own little cameo there. Love Paul Williams. Also Little Enos, for those of you who remember the Bandit films. So yeah, love Paul Williams. But yeah, the grittiness, the darkness of the 70s very much conveys. This was the era of the Rocky Horror Picture Show and the introduction of the world to Tim Curry. Yes, it was on stage first, but it was in the West End. It was in London. It hadn't made it to Broadway yet. So I'm going to count that one. I'm bending my rules.
Okay.
And for so many, that's the introduction to Tim Curry, who will be in another half dozen movie musicals on and on along this list. So many of us identify entertainment by where we saw Tim Curry first. For me, it was the film Annie in 1982, where he played Brewster. Yes, it was a musical, but it was on Broadway first, so hey.
I'm a late bloomer with Tim Curry. The first film I ever saw him was Clue.
Glorious film.
Yeah, very underrated in the passage of time. It's a hilarious movie.
Well, it's a cult classic now. When it came out, they didn't know how to market it. The movie studio didn't know how to market it. Not a musical, but we're taking the side turn. But you had, again, a murderer's row of comedians. Just a brilliant cast of comedians. Yes, Tim Curry, but also Eileen Brennan and Martin Mull and Christopher Lloyd. Just some of the best ever. And Carrie Fisher, who couldn't do the film because of rehab, and they got Leslie Ann Warren, who was outstanding. And of course, the divine Madeline Kahn, who stole every scene she was in.
Always did.
What a great film.
Yeah.
What a great film.
Yes.
And all of them musical people.
Right.
every single one of those people, well, except for Christopher Lloyd, I think, but every other one of those people has appeared in musicals. Leslie Ann Warren for Cinderella, Madeline Kahn for On the 20th Century, Martin Mull for everything Martin Mull did, Eileen Brennan for Little Mary Sunshine. These are all singers and Broadway folk doing this film.
It isn't amazing that all these years have passed and you hear the name Leslie Ann Warren and the first thing people think of is Cinderella.
I don't, but that's me.
No, but I think most people, most folks, I remember when I was a kid because they used to show that yearly, that TV production.
There were productions like that when we think of the 60s and into the 70s. The Peter Pan with Mary Martin came out in the 60s, and that was shown well into the 70s. They even showed it on television when I was a kid in the 80s. It was iconic and classic. It was part of our culture.
I'm going to throw one in the mix here, and it'll shock you. It's a cartoon. Mr. Magoo's Christmas Carol.
Absolutely.
With lyrics by Joel Stein? Seriously? Those songs are unforgettable.
Any one of these little trips down. The folks who are writing these shows, like I could have put How the Grinch Stole Christmas on this list. It would have flown. You've got Thurl Ravenscroft singing this sassy little tune. It's the same song, like 5 or 6 times, 5 or 6 verses, but why not? Mr. Magoo's Christmas, of course. I could have put the Care Bears movie on here and it would have been legit for the composing team that took care of it.
Right.
It was that time period. There were still good quality musicals being made. Many of them were animated. And we are before the Disney Renaissance. We're before 1989 at this point.
Right.
So there wasn't this machine cranking out an animated movie musical a year.
Well, would Fantasia qualify?
Fantasia, I think Fantasia's 50s or 60s. I would consider it a tone poem. I would consider it a concert with animation to support the music.
Yeah.
And that's true of Fantasia 2000 as well. They added a couple.
Easily the most creative thing Disney Studios ever did. Nothing was like it before or since.
He took a chance on that. That was a jump to do Fantasia. I'm glad it was successful. We don't often take jumps creatively anymore in our entertainment field, and I'm going to get to that when I start roasting this century. But we'll get to that in just a moment.
Okay.
Again, 70s, things were grittier. You've got new movie musicals like Grease. Yes, Grease was on stage before, but they wrote new songs for it in the 70s. And it's a whole musical about losing your virginity. Sure, that's a fun topic. But if we start delving into the 80s are kind of subdivided. The early 80s to mid 80s, you had some fun musicals come about, some really interesting films. And then the late 80s into the early 90s, there was kind of a dearth. I'm sure someone's out there is going to correct me. Please come correct me. It's fine. You can correct me. But just doing my own research, the late 80s to early 90s were a little bit of a dearth. But if you look at the early 80s, 1980 kicks off with Xanadu, which was a disco musical at a time when disco was dying. It took Xanadu probably 35 years to get to Broadway in the other direction.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, the songs were still hits. It was Olivia Newton-John. She was all over the radio. So of course we were listening.
That one, people who loved, even in Broadway, people who loved it, and people who hated it, despised it. It's one of those.
Yeah, it's polarizing. Cats is the same way. But being a child when Cats came out, I see my childhood and Dancing Pussycats. So I'm all about it, but I can understand people's problems with it.
Good man. I love it.
I know which side my bread is buttered on. I know where I come from. And yeah, Cats was informative to me. But that same period of the early 1980s, you could argue The Blues Brothers is a musical. Even though this is one of the things that we're going to run into is that it's a musical from previously written songs, which I'm going to use the word pastiche for it. I know there's a better word for it, but we're going to call it a pastiche. It's a bunch of found music, bunch of previously recorded songs, and they're adding it into the plot of a movie, of a show, to create a musical. They're creating a musical out of found tunes. There's plenty of that. We're going to talk more about that as the decades go on. But yeah, The Blues Brothers, great movie. One of my favorite movies. Still holds to this day. Carrie Fisher again.
By the way, we do a Joe Walsh PSA in every show. Did you ever notice in the final scene where they're playing in the prison, one of the prisoners is Joe Walsh?
I believe it. I have not seen it. I now have to go.
Next time you see that end thing, he's right in the front. He's they're singing like a gospel tune, and he's got his arms here yelling hallelujah. You can't miss him.
I will look forward to looking at that.
Gotta see my man Joe, I'm telling you.
Gotta love me some Joe. Also in the 80s, more concert films, things like Purple Rain. I would burn in hell forever if I did not mention Prince, because Prince is changing the complexion of music in the 80s rapidly and powerfully. And you got to mention Prince because he's going to inform the next 30 years of pop music. He wrote for half of the people who were singing in the 80s. He's that prolific, and his work, Purple Rain, still holds. It's still a fascinating movie to watch. For me, also, because I love Harry Nilsson, and because we spoke about it before, the last time, 2 times ago when I was on, got to mention Popeye.
Oh, yeah.
Love Popeye. That's Nilsson's score. And God, it's so much fun. It's so much fun. Robin Williams dove into that role. Robin Williams and Shelley Duvall, what a great film.
That's another polarizing one, though, you have to admit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that if it's a polarizing musical, I'm mostly coming down on enjoying it. There are some times when I don't. But I enjoyed Popeye. Again, I'm a little kid when this came out. I was watching the cartoons, which were still being shown. And again, this was the 80s. People parented their children by plunking them in front of the television or throwing them out of the house. In my case, when I was young enough, it was, here, watch some Popeye, watch some Three Stooges. Still informs my personality to this day. Love me some slapstick.
Oh, me too.
But yeah, absolutely. Other things I loved in the 80s, because the 80s, they were polarizing film. There was a movie musical that was made in Australia, like tail end of the disco era. It came out in like 84. It was still kind of disco-y there, called The Pirate Movie, which was a retelling of The Pirate of Penzance. And it starred, Christopher Atkins and Christy McNichol as your Frederick and Mabel. It's a hoot and a half. It's all full of pop culture references. It's bawdy. It's sexy. It's a good time. It's really cheesy. But man, I have so much fun watching it. It's such a fun little movie. I remember showing it to my spouse when we were in our 20s. And Tucker's like, why are you showing me this? I still love it to this day. My big flag, my big enjoyable for this. This is one of the situations where you have a rock artist writing all the songs for a film. And there was a bunch of that, but to me, that's iconic because if you get Jim Henson to direct the film and you've got one rock star writing all the songs for it and starring in the film at the same time, then you get Labyrinth and you get something that is spectacular, not understood at the time, but considered one of the greatest fantasy movies ever now. Such a brilliant movie musical with David Bowie writing a bunch of songs for you, and just so significant and so formative for all of us who watched it when we were kids. And our folks are like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. And I was going, what are you talking about? This is fabulous. That's another film that I totally wore the film out. We had to buy a new videotape of Labyrinth. By the time we get to the 90s are a little bit sparse. I found a couple that were significantly worth mentioning. Certainly in the early 90s, you had Newsies, which would eventually go to Broadway, but it started out as a movie musical. And, oh God, who was in that? I think that was Christian Bale was in that, who was later to be Batman. A fun movie about labor and labor difficulties. I doubt Disney would make a film like that now. But at the time, it was very, let's have a bunch of kids dance around and be newsies. Put them in newsy cap and knickerbockers. It's going to be great. It was a fun show in the mid-90s. But most of the resources for movie musicals, once you hit the 90s, are driven towards animation. Disney's renaissance has begun. 1989 has happened, The Little Mermaid has been created, and everybody's making a movie musical. This goes for Don Bluth with An American Tail and with Anastasia. But Disney is just cranking out a movie musical each year. They've got their in-house, Howard Ashman and Alan Menken, and they're just writing musical after musical after musical. When Ashman passes away, they reach out to Phil Collins. They reach out to Elton John. It's just musical party over and over and over and over again. And that is a lot of your 90s movie musicals. They're just anime.
What did you think of Randy, of all people, one of the most acerbic songwriters of all time, Randy Newman bursting upon the soundtrack scene? Are you right? If you've ever heard Randy Newman's actual music, and then his amazing score work,
Excuse me.
How do you feel about his work over the course of I guess that would be 80s, 90s mostly?
I feel of Randy Newman. Here's a fun parallel for you. I feel of Randy Newman the way I feel of Bob Saget. I feel like you had this composer who was writing acerbic and gritty stuff. And when he was funny, it was like inappropriately funny, like Short People. Then he starts writing for things like Toy Story.
Right.
And the theme song for Monk. And it's this much happier Randy Newman. It's more of a happy-go-lucky Randy Newman. It does mirror Bob Saget being the filthiest stand-up comedian to ever walk the face of the earth, doing Full House and America's Funniest Home Video.
Right. I mean, you've got a friend in me. When he started to go in that route, even I was shocked. But then I heard the quality of the work, and then I saw the films. I said, boy, he can really do this.
Yeah, it can. Yeah, it can. I will add a musical to the late 90s, which was remarkably influential. And everybody looks at me funny. Again, it's an animated piece, but it's not the same quality of animation as the Disney oeuvre. It was kind of making fun of the Disney oeuvre. And that is South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. Notably, Stephen Sondheim's favorite musical of the last 30 years of his life. He would rewatch it. South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut was a cohesive musical featuring some foul-mouthed little monsters. And I probably watched it 50 or 60 times in the 90s. It was a cultural touchstone. It was fun. I was in college at this point. We just put the videotape on in college. And we'd all just sit there and watch it and sing along. And I'm not going to sing along with those tunes right now because they're vulgar. But what a great time that show was. Yeah, it harkened back to a time of the movie musical. It begins with a song called Mountain Town, it starts out kind of like, Oh, What a Beautiful Morning from Oklahoma. It's such a love song to the movie musicals that have come before. And that was 1998, 1999, something like that, just before the turn of the millennia. And that's the one I have underlined for the 1990s with South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut.
I saw it in the theater.
Yep. I did twice, and I bought the videotape, and I still have the original videotape, which has a sticker on it that says, in Canada, you have to be over 14 to see the film.
Ah, those Canadians.
I love the sticker. They made sure the sticker was on there, and it was so good. The 2000s. In the 2000s, you do still have the occasional original movie musical. They're there, but it's of a different quality. There's a certain kind of, let's put out as much pop culture as possible. Let's get as much money out of our IP as possible starting to happen once we hit the 2000s. In the early 2000s, you have something like Moulin Rouge, which, yes, fun movie musical. There are a couple of original songs, but a lot of it are reorchestrations of music that already exists. So that's a lot of this pastiche musical. Let's grab a bunch of songs that exist already, change the setting. We're going to have this happen in an unknown 19th century Paris at the Moulin Rouge. It's fun, and I think it's an Oscar for Nicole Kidman, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, it's a lot of reusing of old songs, Up Where We Belong and Roxanne and other tunes that were rock hits in the 80s. We're already nostalgic for the 80s, and it's only 2001. Yeah. But there's a lot of that. We get more jukebox musicals. That's where you take the work of one artist and you make a whole musical out of it. I think of Mamma Mia by ABBA.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a bunch of ABBA songs. That's all it is. Beyond the Sea would be Bobby Darin. Similar thing, 8 Mile. It's all Eminem. It's one artist, and it's a bunch of their songs. And sometimes it's a biopic, like Ray, or sometimes it's the artists themselves, like Tenacious D and The Pick of Destiny. It's just using an album of theirs to create a musical. Even Camp, which is such a big musical for people who were kids at that time who wanted to go into musical theater, it's a bunch of other people's songs. It's not a cohesive show. It's not telling a story per se.
Mm-hmm.
There are some musicals that make their transition to film, not as many anymore, but Rent makes its transition to film in the mid-2000s after being a Broadway success for, 12, 15 years. It's great. It's great to see it on film, but it's the same problem they were having. It was the same thing they were doing in the 50s and 60s. You found a musical that was good enough, let's plunk it on film. Original things that came out at the time, the High School Musical series, they did write some original songs for that. Very much a Disney network kind of thing. And they made 2 sequels of it because the first one was so successful. Again, sequels to musicals. This is the time period we're in. Let's get as much money out of an IP as possible. I find there's a diminishing level of returns when you do that. You don't always get the same quality of music when you're writing the 3rd or 4th version of it. When you put out the sequel to the cartoon musical Beauty and the Beast, you're going to get some tunes together, but they're not going to be of the same caliber, I don't think. Maybe, but you begin to see more of a let's make a 4th or 5th sequel of this, or let's make a live action version of the musical that we did. You see companies really starting to give you the same material over again and charge you money for it. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that we aren't making as many original pieces any longer. And I don't know what that says about our culture.
How about Frozen?
Oh, Frozen is in the 2010s.
Right.
Frozen is, again, part of the Disney musical oeuvre.
Right.
So I didn't even bring it up to mention it. They haven't made a live action version of Frozen yet. They haven't done that yet, but I'm sure they will in about 5-10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you made a sequel to Frozen. Again, the music, I find the music in the first film superior to my taste, but folks can feel free to disagree with me. Into the Unknown is a bop. There's some good music in the second one, but I find the first one to be superior. We'll get to that once we get to the 2010s. I just want to make sure.
Okay.
You start to see other companies doing animated films and building scores, and some of those songs carry over onto the radio still. But it's 1 or 2 songs rather than the whole book as it once used to be. Now, since you mentioned the 2010s and Frozen, yeah, you're still seeing Disney churning out good musicals, but it's not with the same frequency. There are some duds in between the hits. Frozen's a big hit. Instantly, they put a couple of rides in their theme parks about Frozen. You're going to wait another 5 or 6 years for the next big one, which some say it's Coco. Coco is very good, but it's 1 or 2 songs. Whereas their next big movie musical is Encanto, which is coming out about the same time as The Epidemic. And that's a movie musical where its songs appeared on the radio. You could turn on the pop music radio and hear We Don't Talk About Bruno. So Lin-Manuel Miranda is our flag bearer now for the movie musical and for musicals in general. Frankly, we love you, Lin-Manuel Miranda. And Disney knew this and hired him on the spot. And Moana and Encanto, and I don't know what he's coming out with next, but I look forward to it. Thank you, Lin-Manuel. The 2010s, again, more jukeboxy stuff. Things like Pitch Perfect, or things like Bohemian Rhapsody. Biopics about artists are a thing. Jukebox musicals are a thing. Or grabbing a bunch of pop songs and having some actors sing it. Throw together a loose plot line, poof, you have a movie musical. But it's not original quite. There's a plot line, but it's not like someone writing on the town for film. It's not quite the same. And I know this makes me sound kind of jaded and bitter, but it's not. When On the Town came out, there were dozens of musicals coming out of just below that caliber or even equal to that caliber on an annual basis. And so it's a little bit different now. It's a different way of constructing. That's not to say you don't have original things coming out. Hayek and Paul start writing. You get The Greatest Showman, which was a big hit. Lots of people love The Greatest Showman from the 2010s. You have La La Land, which won Oscars. La La Land was a big hit, and there's some original tunes there. For my taste, I know it's animated. I love the music that Steven Universe was putting out. There were a number of children's shows. There's another one that's escaped me. I'm sure someone will mention it in the comments. But shows like Steven Universe are the ones creating more traditional musical theater work. And Steven Universe had a movie where you had 6 or 8 songs, which is tremendous for an animated movie musical. There was a lot that came out. The remake of A Star Is Born came out then. I think that was with Lady Gaga. That was actually a lot of fun. Glad to have seen that made. But yeah, when there are movie musicals now, it's one or other forms of regurgitation. Songs that already existed, all songs from a particular artist, especially a biopic, or remounting a show that's already existed, refilming a show that's already existed, putting out another Rocky Horror Picture Show, another Annie, another Hairspray, redoing something that's already been done is the tack currently as of 2010s.
I can't tell you the number of times we'll see an ad for something or a new film coming up. One of us turns to the other one and goes, can somebody come up with an original idea?
Yes, please. Basically, you're looking at Lin-Manuel Miranda. I'm going to say his name again. Thank you. Or Pasek and Paul, or other writers. There's still quality work being written. It's just hard to get it seen. There are many up-and-coming composers that are out there writing new material, writing good material, but it's hard to get it past the producers. It's hard to get it seen in a room. It's hard to get people to shell out the millions of dollars it takes to mount something like that so that more people can see it. It is a fault of our system, and it means that we're going to get a lot of regurgitation for the coming future, sadly. It's corporate entertainment, and that's what we're looking at. They want to make as much money off things without having to pay for anything new. And I know that sounds jaded, but that's where I'm at.
Well, in the era of CGI, AI, go on to the I's and me's and you's, I think that you're right on the money. I think the slicker a musical gets, the worse they get. The more technical they get, in terms of presentation. The music's supposed to carry a musical. Don't you agree?
With all my heart. And I will tell you, there's nothing that replaces live theater. When something goes wrong, when somebody drops a line or misses something in a live show, that's when the magic happens, because all of a sudden people who've done 200, 300, 400 runs of that show have to wake up and figure out what to do. And then you see life that's when you get standing ovations on Broadway still, it's often because something went wrong and everybody's like, okay, here we go. And it becomes this amazing experience. I love covered theater where something has to be fixed. Live theater, you don't know what's going to happen. It could be wild, something weird. And that's what I love about it. That's what keeps me coming back. The movie musical now is slick and polished, and it's nice, but it's lacking some soul, perhaps. It's lacking teeth. It's lacking something of what came before. Maybe we need to go back to the 70s. Maybe we need to be darker and grittier again. I don't know. Certainly, that's where my mind has been going lately.
But, I see the encroachment of technology taking over live performance in many different ways. If you go to a rock concert featuring a veteran band now, right? You go to Jones Beach Amphitheater or something like that, and the entire back of the stage is now a multimedia extravaganza. It's not five guys standing on the stage playing anymore. You will see them when they were 20, or their album cover from 1967 or something. It kind of overwhelms you, and you forget you're watching a concert.
Yep.
I always thought you're supposed to look at the musicians, not at the staging personally. And this goes on to Broadway too. I saw the Who's Tommy, and there was a lot of, this was 2 years ago, whatever it was when they came out, a year and a half ago. There was a lot of multimedia in that. None of it was human. It was just a lot of very impressive staging. But by the same token, let me look at the people. It wasn't necessary.
This was something that they were trying to. I remember when Woman in White came out on Broadway and this big rotating CGI screen, and they were trying to do all sorts of technical stuff with the CGI screen, and the graphics weren't quite where they needed to be yet, and the audience just razzed the whole show because the singers sounded tired. They were working too hard to carry the audience because the CGI wasn't doing it, and the sets were minimal beyond it, so it became desensitizing. It became not what the theater goers wanted. And we see that with modern movie musicals. For those of you who love Wicked, cover your ears. The film versions of Wicked is just, it's a bunch of CGI. And yeah, there's performers and they're singing there. Cynthia Erivo was doing magnificent work. The cast at large is doing magnificent work, but I can't get past the CGI. It's taking me out of the reality of the show. And maybe I'm old. Maybe I'm, kids get off my lawn. Maybe it's because I'm pushing 50. Maybe I'm just a cranky middle-aged man. But I would like something to be a bit more tangible. I want something practical. I want to feel like I'm watching something real. And I know that I'm saying that about musical theater. So this tells you that there's something about it. There's some uncanny valley about that. And it's a concern for me.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
Ariana Grande and Lady Gaga are
Yes.
two of the most spectacular singers I think I've ever heard.
They
Both
really
of them.
are. Love
Both of
them.
them. Forget about their records.
Uh-huh.
Them just singing, the act of what they do, so effortless, so perfect, so pitch perfect. Jealous as hell. As a former singer, I can vouch that.
Skills.
Holy smokes! When I just see them sing, they could sing the phone book, and I'll be enthralled.
Absolutely. Yeah. I adore their work. Love Ariana Grande. Love Lady Gaga. We have much Gaga here in the house. Yeah, it is just, we have tremendous performers doing tremendous things. But there's something about the way that movies are made, and I'm sure it's to save money. I'm sure it's all about money, but it's artistically, it falls stagnant. You're not giving us anything real any longer. Say what you like about the fantasies of musical theater in the 1950s and 60s. It was real human beings on real sets. And when you look at something like Donald O'Connor doing one of his numbers from Singin' in the Rain, he's really doing those moves. He is doing those flips in the air. He is making that happen. That's a human being doing that. And that's what I want to see. I want to see human beings doing amazing works of skill. And that's what I want from my musicals. The 2020s have not proven rife with that.
Stuff scares me. Technology's scaring me. Like somebody on Facebook, a friend of mine, wrote yesterday that I think it was a Cleveland plain dealer, and forgive me if I'm reporting this wrong, but I don't think I am. But we'll just say a major American newspaper has changed their jargon for the writers and the reporters, and then they've hired an AI editor to feed those reporters notes, and then AI is going to write the articles. If that don't scare you, I don't know what does.
Hell no.
In any event, there's no soul in any of this. Entertainment needs a soul behind it. You can try to dazzle with all the lights and flash you got. But you know what? One singer standing behind a microphone, and it's a spectacular singer like Ariana Grande, she doesn't need anything else.
She doesn't.
Just sing.
Just be there.
It's a skill. It's there's soul in that. There's no soul in programming a computer to mimic what a human being does.
I agree. So to that end, here is my thesis statement as we get to the 2020s. Wicked is out there. The Prom is a redo of something that was on stage. Odessa gives me a little bit of hope. That's kind of like a rock retelling of Orpheus in the underworld. K-pop Demon Hunters is the big musical right now. Again, that's an animated film, but that's what the kids are listening to. It's all K-pop right now. If you want something that was made in the 2020s, which gives you a little bit of hope that something like this could still be made, look to, and this was 2020 or 2021, Tick, Tick, Boom. Tick, Tick, Boom was the first time a film had been made of something that never made it to Broadway. It was an off-Broadway kind of cobbling together of songs. Yeah, okay, it's a biopic. But the musical was a biopic. It was telling his own story. So I don't feel so badly about that. It was constructed and real and fun and had real live, honest to goodness people in it. But it was also set in the 1990s. Since it was set 35 years ago, it had to be tangible. There was no way around it. The composer of the music that was in the show is dead. He died in 1996. So you get this sense of, in order to find something tangible, we have to go back. And while I know that sounds like it's not a hopeful thing, it is still hopeful that we might look back on previous art and go, hey, wait a minute, it was really cool when we did it this way. Maybe we should be doing things that way again.
There you go. I absolutely feel that when you say it. Soul only comes from human beings. And soul only comes from someone expressing themselves. And you could play polkas and have soul doing it, because if you mean it and you love it and you're into it, that's what soul is.
Absolutely, Alex.
And I think the same goes with movie making. I mean, if you're just saying program this, program that, do this, do it this way, do it that way, because that's what's selling right now, you're going to miss out on a lot of soul.
Absolutely. I mentioned him in passing there, but I went to school with Alex Mangstner, who's this tremendous polka artist, and the man plays with joy, always playing with joy, and he's constantly working because people want to hear polka. So why not?
I insist if you're a musician or an actor,
Yeah.
and you are really enthusiastic and loving what you do, it will translate to an audience every time.
Every time. Every time. When you see a musical on stage, and Lord love you, it's usually a bunch of 20-somethings, but because the rest of us can't afford to go on the road any longer because the money's not there anymore, you see people who are poor, folks who are not making, they're making just enough to feed themselves, not enough to pay their rent, and they're touring the United States, and they're doing it for the sheer love of doing theater because it's what they wanted to do. And maybe they last 5 years, 10 years, maybe they last 20 years, but it's done out of love. It's not done out of a callous nature to try and make as much money as possible. That's what musical theater was for me growing up. It's what it still could be, but we don't see it in the movie musical anymore. I hope I'm wrong. Somebody out there prove me wrong, but I'm not feeling it anymore. I'm sorry.
You know what? They say everything old is new. Somebody's going to come up with some plain old production that's going to take the world by storm. I know that's going to happen.
Bring it.
Because once you've had your ears and eyes blown off in these super extravaganzas that they're staging now, somebody's going to do something very simple with a lot of heart, and it'll work. It will.
I remember once coming out in 2007, that was the kind of movie musical with a bunch of heart. It was so simple, so elegantly played. It was a simple little love story of two people writing music. Yeah. Everything old is new again. Bring back integrity.
In every form of life. God, yes.
Let's make integrity cool again. Could we do that? I'd love that.
And the T-shirt I would wear.
My God. And if nothing else for the movie musical, because it is symptomatic of the society we live in today.
There you go. A perfect capper to a great performance by y'all. You did a hell of a job, my friend.
Again, we went 110 years in an hour and a half. Not bad.
Anyway, you did another wonderful job. We always love having you on here. Why don't you tell the fine folks who are listening where they can find you if they want to know more about you?
Oh, goodness. I'm easy enough to find online. You can find whatever show I'm doing. I usually put it up at www.adambaritot.com. Right now, it's mostly about teaching, but the very next time I've got a production going or a new voiceover, you will hear about it there.
Anybody who got his spelling of his name based on the way he just read it gets a T-shirt. Man, that was fast.
This is a recording. Re-listen to the recording.
There you go. Yeah, hit that 10-second button on your phone. Beep, right? As you listen to your podcast, yeah. But anyway, Adam and I have been friends for several years now, and I enjoyed every moment I've spent with him. And dude, it's good to see you again.
Always good to see you, my friend. Thank you.
And you're going to come back, aren't you?
You know I will. Come up with a new idea. I'll always show up.
All right. The greatest Three Stooges shorts. No, I'm kidding. So you'd probably enjoy a show like that.
I would. Niagara Falls, please.
Oh, Larry the Cheese. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, one of a kind, a theater maven par excellence. It's Adam Baritot. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with the elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. How about that, Adam Baritot, huh? He's quite the theater maven, and we're really glad to have him on the show, as always. It's always a treat to see him, hear his views, and we hope to get him back on the show real soon. So that puts the capper on this one, I think. Write to us, outdatedent. It's outdatedent@gmail.com. Find our website. Type in Bob Smith Outdated Entertainment Hour on any browser, and boom, it will come right up. Our website, and also where you can hear this podcast, is available virtually everywhere podcasts are available. The Outdated Entertainment Hour and the Outdated Wrestling Hour are productions of Bob Smith podcasts. I think I'll leave you be on this one. It was a lengthy show, but I think it was a good one. And we're going to be back hopefully in just 2 weeks with Steve Gennarelli, and we're going to talk about, brace yourselves, Steely Dan, the legendary classic rock band. We're going to take a deep dive into their careers, and we hope you enjoy that one too. So until next time, this is Bob Smith. This is the Outdated Entertainment Hour, and in the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Boy, we need it. Peace and love.